pharmacist.
Well, I appreciate that to my good friend from South Georgia. You know, it is amazing in those communities that you just spoke of. They need that the help. Not that they're asking for a handout. They're just asking for fairness. And I think that's what we miss so often today in our debates here on this floor, and should be on this floor, is we talk about one group against the other. And really, Madam Speaker, this is about fairness. This is a simple issue of fairness and saying we in the government need to be in a proper constitutional role and look at it in the framework of not tilting the scale one way or the other, but saying what are we doing that helps the American people, and also looking ahead to, especially in an area such as health care, in which we can find common ground, and I believe we will as we go forward here. So when we're talking about Medicare Part D and in some of the proposed changes to CMS 2 Part D, and is really the need for generic drug reimbursement limits known as maximum allowable cost, or MAX. You know, generic drugs account for nearly 80% of prescriptions, but a community pharmacist is kept in the dark as to how pharmacy benefit managers determine MAC rates for these medications. You see, Congress and CMS must step in to give pharmacists more transparency into this process so they are empowered to evaluate if specific contracts would help them better serve our neighborhoods and families. I'm a big believer, Madam Speaker, that transparency is important. That one of the reasons and the basic underlying trust today, when you look out among the country and you see the unfortunateness of the low esteem that Congress is held in, I believe it goes back to a matter of trust. It goes back to a matter of trust, of not believing that what goes on here has their best interest at heart. And I think this is sort of what we're talking about tonight with our pharmacists. And pharmacists, no matter where they work, are wonderful individuals who truly, I believe, have the best interest of the folks who come to see them at heart. The problem is in the system, especially when it deals with pharmacy benefit managers and the inherent falseness and the inherent problems that are faced with the pharmacy benefit managers and our independent pharmacists. Pharmacists need an appeals process when disputes over MACs arise, and timely adjustment of MAC lists by PBMs to reflect rising drug costs and ensure consumers have the information they need regarding copays. The status quo cannot continue, because right now an amount a pharmacy is paid for in the morning for a particular medication can change to a different rate for the same medication in the same afternoon. For those who may be watching tonight or who will be watching, can you believe this? We're not talking the price of OPEC here. This is not an oil commodity. This is a drug cost. And yet they can't get the help that they need just for simple transparency. The uncertainty is devastating to pharmacies and the patients they serve. This process is further complicated by the fact that PBMs frequently maintain multiple MAC lists for the same health plan. One for the health plan and one for the pharmacy. One behind the mirror, one in front of the mirror. One outside, one inside. Where is this going to stop? I've come to this forum many times and that just still boggles the mind for me. How can you do this? You know, I'm concerned that this provides PBMs with the power to obtain significant revenues through deceptive practices without consumers being any the wiser. My independent community pharmacists and chain pharmacies in Northeast Georgia work long hours each and every day to provide care and advice to our families and our seniors. But they are frustrated and tired by the lack of transparency in generic drug pricing. PBMs have a track record of refusing to divulge the method they use to determine generic prescription drug price reimbursements in the take-it-or-leave-it contracts pharmacists must sign to assist patients. In addition, PBMs often fail to update MAC pricing in a timely fashion. Conveniently, this often occurs when there is a price spike, wouldn't you guess? Oh, oops, we forgot to update it. And by the way, the price went up. When you consider the generic prescription drugs make up approximately 80% of all dispensed drugs, you can understand why pharmacies of all sizes and affiliations are frustrated. I was pleased when CMS released its proposed rule for Part D on January 7th of this year, because it included several positive provisions. Even though I did not support the rule in its entirety, I did support key provisions that would give independent community pharmacists the ability to try and compete in preferred pharmacy networks, provide important generic pricing transparency reforms, although they were not as strong as I would like to have seen them. The proposed rule also contained measures documenting the problems with mail-order delivery delays and the difficulties beneficiaries have when trying to change their prescriptions over an automated telephone hotline. But unfortunately, on March the 10th, CMS announced that it would be holding off on finalizing certain provisions in the rule. One of those provisions being the any willing pharmacy clarification regarding preferred pharmacy networks. This was a devastating blow to Northeast Georgia pharmacies and the families that rely on them. And be frank to anyone listening, not just Northeast Georgia, Madam Speaker. It's all over the country. And this is something that is disturbing to me and many others. I continue to remain hopeful that the provisions on generic drug pricing transparency will be finalized when the rule is published. However, I don't believe simply hoping is enough. In this country, I think we have found out over the past few years that hope is not a plan. And hope is not something I'm going to sit by and watch when we look. So this evening, along with my colleague, Ms. Losbach, and I introduced H.R. 4437, the Generic Drug Pricing Fairness Act. This legislation will provide much needed, although reasonable transparency by doing a few things. Let me list those. It will provide clarity to plan sponsors and pharmacies regarding how MAC pricing is determined. It will establish an appeals process in which dispensing provider can contest a listed MAC price. It provides standardization for how products are selected for inclusion on a MAC list. And it compels PBM disclosures about the use of multiple MAC lists and whether or not MAC pricing is utilized for mail-order products. More than 80% of the prescriptions that community pharmacists dispenses that we've talked about are generic. And that is good for both beneficiaries and for the solvency of the Part D program. Pharmacies deserve to know what they will be reimbursed for when providing a service. When market factors cause the price of generics to change, pharmacies should also be informed of that change in a timely and efficient fashion. You know, again, I started this conversation with my dear friend from Georgia about fairness, about simple fairness. And when there's a system set up in which there's a problem exists, in which basically the system is picking winners and losers, the system is causing this unhealthy, problematic problems for our independent pharmacies, then that is when we need to act. That is the government's role, is to remove the impediments toward a free market and be able to compete, and those pharmacists need to know that Washington cares. When you understand what people are looking for, then you can begin to act as I think we are all elected to do, Madam Speaker, and that is to listen to our communities. That is to listen to our folks and understand that many times these kind of situations affect the everyday lives of people getting up and just trying to make a living, just trying to get the drugs and the necessities that they need. And what they're having not understanding is why their independent pharmacists are struggling to stay afloat, for one, and also struggling every day just to be able to provide basic care to them because they're under a system in which transparency is just not there. You see, the additional topic that I would like to talk about, not only concerning the transparency issues and the MAC pricing, is that I hear from pharmacists back home is the readiness of Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, CMS, to finalize the Medicaid drug reimbursement changes in July 2014. Immediately upon implementing average manufacturing price base federal upper limits for Medicaid drugs as required under the Affordable Care Act. CMS expects states to view Medicaid reimbursements as a two-part formula where the movement toward cost-based drug reimbursement should also correspond with changes to dispensing fees based on pharmacy cost. I believe that these dual goals are overly ambitious for July 2014. A side note here, I think the entire ACA or Obamacare is not only too optimistic but wrong for America, but that's another special order for another night. When we look at this, the thing that I want to look at is that most states must take several time-consuming steps before implementation and corresponding dispensing fee changes. First, many states require legislative or regulatory changes to implement the new federal upper limits. For states that require legislative changes, there simply is not enough time to pass the necessary legislation. Moreover, in most states, budgets will be finalized before these federal upper limits are scheduled to be published. In November 2013, CMS stated that as states shift their Medicaid reimbursement methodologies, they either should or must conduct cost of dispensing fee surveys to determine fair and equitable total Medicaid drug reimbursement rates. Finally, we'll need to file a state plan amendment with CMS prior to implementing the Medicaid reimbursement methodology changes. And again, this just adds extra and additional time to the process. At the end of the day, it seems clear that most states will be unable to meet CMS expectation by July 2014 deadline. Accordingly, I joined several of my colleagues here in the House to write a letter encouraging